We're here at the 2024 Budapest Forum, and I'm joined now by US expert and professor at Texas Lutheran University, H. David Beer. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
You're from America, you live in America. There's a US presidential election in November. How much of an impact do you think that will have on the world, including Europe?
Well, I mean, it will make a big difference, right? If depending on who wins, because Trump and Harris have very different conceptions of U.S. foreign policy or U.S. place in the world. So I think if I don't know who's going to win. Okay, no one knows. But I think if Harris wins, it'll be something similar to what the foreign policy will be. Something similar to what it's been so far. I mean, we don't know exactly, but fairly there'll be a lot of continuity with the Biden administration. Of course, if Trump wins, we don't know exactly what he'll do either. But he clearly is isolationist, and he said he wants to pull the United States out of NATO. Even if he doesn't do that, I think he would. The U.S. will take a passive role. So I think that a second Trump administration would definitely impact the sort of traditional security guarantee that's come from the United States for Europe.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about just how vast that difference will be, depending on who Americans vote into the White House. Kamala Harris, a stable option then, and Donald Trump, perhaps more volatile.
Yeah, well, so we don't really know what Trump. Well, Trump would be the big difference, and of course, we never really know exactly what he'll do. But so I don't really know what he'll do. But I mean, also the vice president, candidate.
How uncertain is that? The fact that no one knows either which way.
Well, if he does what he says he's going to do, then it will be a big difference, right? So then we'll have a lot of tariffs and sort of trade wars. And we'll have the U.S. either not in NATO or basically not, essentially adopting an isolationist position, and we'll have some sort of conflict with China. So if he does all the things he says he's going to do, it'll be pretty radical. But I guess no one really knows how far he'll follow through on it.
Should the EU be worried, though, about a Trump presidency?
If I was in the EU, I would be worried about it. Yeah, I would be worried. I would be worried about it because I would be trying to think about how to handle a Trump presidency. Maybe Trump will start a kind of trade war with the European Union. And I think if I was in Europe, I would be worried in general about rethinking the sort of European security, because I think it's clear if Trump is, to me, that's the biggest, most obvious difference is the security guarantee. If Trump is the president, you won't have a reliable assurances to protect European security, and that will matter. I mean, well, also, I guess the question is what happens in Ukraine, right? So Trump says he wants to. I mean, I think the United States won't support Ukraine anymore. I don't know what impact that would have on concretely how the war in Ukraine would play out, but there wouldn't be U.S. support, and I don't know if the Europeans are capable of sort of stepping up. Yeah.
Well, and you make a good point there, because the EU itself is facing a number of challenges at the moment. Hungary is actually the EU Council, holding the EU Council presidency, and we've talked to guests and experts who say, well, basically the EU is in survival mode until Poland takes over in January. So do you feel like, or do you get the sense that if Trump is voted in, the US starts to pull support from, let's say, the war in Ukraine, that will really weaken Ukraine's position, given the uncertainty within the EU itself?
Of course it will weaken the Ukraine's position. I don't know if that means, I mean, I'm really not an expert, but I don't, of course it will weaken Ukraine's position. I don't know if it means the war will end or not, or I don't know how it could go into a kind of, one of these low-grade protracted. I guess that's what I would think is more likely. The war won't end, but it'll go into some sort of lower-grade, conflict.
Someone like Donald Trump would be pretty keen to sit down with a guy like Vladimir Putin, or indeed Viktor Orban. Can that be a good thing when you're ending or trying to end a conflict?
I don't think it'll. I just don't really think it'll happen. I just can't see Trump really playing a role. I just don't think he's really capable of negotiating, despite what he says. So, I could be totally wrong, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
You talked about the isolationism that sort of Trump would bring, or in general that's emerged in the US, also a growing trend of protectionism, nationalism. What does that mean for the world when a powerhouse like the US is starting to look inward instead of outward?
Well, they say nature abhors a vacuum, right? So if the U.S. retrenches even more than it is now, then other people will move in to try to fill the space, right? Or I think you'd find, all over the world, you'd probably find places where you'd have governments trying to sort of test the limits wherever the U.S. has sort of provided the background or the backbone for certain kinds of security arrangements. I would think you'd see a lot of testing. I know more about Europe than other places, but I think everywhere where you have, I guess, bad actors, they'll be testing to see how far they can go. That's what I would think.
Do you get a sense that in the US itself that there's a particular concern that the US looks inward instead of outward?
No, I don't think so. Not too much. I mean, maybe among elites. I think the U.S. has a lot of problems, right? And when you have domestic problems, and you can't really focus on the international problems as much. And so I think that I think one consequence of the Iraq War, which pretty much everyone thinks was a mistake now, is that it led to a sort of resurgence of isolationism. And I think that general trend is going to be in the United States for a while. I mean, it won't be. I think the elites understand the importance of all these international relations, but I think the emphasis in the direction of American politics for a while will be, if not totally isolationist, sort of either retrenchment or isolationism.
When we look at, we're here in Hungary, we're here in Budapest, obviously the Prime Minister Viktor Orban has seriously railed against the EU and its general message of unity, I guess, but he's quite comfortable having a chat to Donald Trump. What do you make of Viktor Orban as a diplomat or someone that can try and communicate across different lines of communication and could potentially, if Donald Trump's voted in, EU relations improve because someone like Viktor Orban is able to communicate with him?
The question is, what does Orban want, right? And what Orban wants is he wants to be left alone by the United States. Right now you have the U.S. ambassador to Hungary is extremely critical of Orban and really applying pressure, right? Not only with words, but with various actions. So what Orban wants that to go away. And so he's adopted the strategy, well, if I flatter Donald Trump and Donald Trump becomes president, then this will go away. And he's right. I think if Donald Trump is president, then I don't think there'll be pressure from the United States on Hungary.
It'll be a total gear change.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a total. So that will go away. I don't know how much if U.S. pressure goes away, I don't know how much that will improve or alter Hungary's situation within Europe. I guess it'll make Orban's life a little more pleasant. I'm not sure that'll have a lot of consequences. I think for Hungary, the relationship with Europe is what matters.
You mentioned before that the EU should be worried of a Trump presidency, and you've mentioned there as well that Trump doesn't really understand Europe or indeed international affairs. At a time where I guess foreign affairs is really critical. I mean, we've got two different conflicts, we've got all sorts of violence and uncertainty and unrest around the world. Having a US president that doesn't really understand international affairs, what will that mean?
It'll be bad. I mean, so that it'll. I think that what we can say is that it will be bad, but I don't think we can say concretely what will happen, and because I think it's kind of very unpredictable. But you obviously would rather have a president, a U.S. president, who's committed to the sort of current international order, and is committed, understands the importance of global stability and so forth. And I mean, Trump doesn't understand any of that stuff, doesn't care about it.
So if it will be bad, take me inside the mind, and perhaps Europeans inside the mind of a US voter that votes for Trump.
Well, they don't. No one's thinking about the people who voting for Trump are not really thinking about international politics. Of course, I mean, there are these sort of far right figures in America that are like, toad Orban and say Orban is really good. I don't think that there's a lot of receptiveness to that message in the American population. But the voters that are voting for Trump are voting for Trump not because of for some other reason.
When it comes to that vote in the US in November, do you think that the whole world will kind of be on tenterhooks as to which way it will go?
Yeah, I would think so, don't you? I don't know. I mean, you have to ask that people around the world. But yeah, I think it's pretty consequential. It's a pretty consequential election for the world. Yeah.
What does that, I guess, uncertainty create for the world, right? I mean, we've got one candidate who would be reasonably stable. We've got one candidate that would be it's
unpredictable,
unknown, unpredictable, and it's unknown what they would do. And when you look at all the polls, it's neck and neck.
Yeah.
What does that type of uncertainty do for a world that is going through so much already?
Well, I think you've got certain segments, political actors that are sort of rooting for Donald Trump, right? And so they think they may have their day, like Orban for one, and so they may be getting a little more, aggressive is not quite the right word, but they're a little more active and hopeful. Yeah, that's one consequence. You probably have other people who are just thinking that the United States is just not going to be, over the long run, it's not going to be a completely reliable, consistent, even if Trump doesn't win. I mean, the Republican Party is sort of Trumpified, and so if somebody else comes along, I mean, they may not be like Trump, but there's clearly a change in America. There's a lot of disagreement in America about America's role in the world. So I would think that other people would be just a little worried. You better think about a way to develop some sort of strategies to handle a world where the United States is not going to play the same kind of role that it played in during the Cold War or in the years after the Cold War.
You're a real expert on Hungarian politics. Tell me a little bit about why someone like Viktor Orban gets on so well with someone like Donald Trump.
Viktor Orban, so both of these guys are transactional. Viktor Orban's approach to foreign policy is transactional mostly, and Trump's is certainly transactional. So Viktor Orban he's been working on buttering himself up with Trump for a while. And he's got these also, so that's why he gets along with Trump, because he endorsed Trump, and then Orban is also he has these think tanks here in Hungary that have connections with certain segments of the right in America, and these people, J.D. Vance is sort of their guy. So when Trump selected J.D. Vance as his running mate, they were very happy about it in Hungary.
And just to end, with the transatlantic relations evolving, particularly between Europe and the United States, how do you see the future of NATO and its role in maintaining European security and defence?
How do I see the role in general, or if Trump wins, or
in general?
Well, I think there's still a need for NATO because you have a Russian, Russia's invaded a country, Ukraine. So it seems to me, and I think that, the possibility of war in Europe and these sort of attempts to, revise territories, and I think Russia looks like it's, at least for the foreseeable future, is a security threat. That's what I think. I'm an American, so I see it as a security threat, and so I think NATO would have a role to play. It does have a role to play.
And how does that shift? You mentioned.
Well, I think if Trump is the president, then I don't think you can rely on NATO. At least you can't rely on the United States being the backbone of NATO, at least for the 4 years. So you won't have that kind of. I don't think NATO will go away completely, but I think you probably have to have. You're going to get some sort of regional alliances, maybe the Northern European countries, Scandinavian countries. There's going to have to be some sort of adjustment with sort of smaller alliances to address the situation, the threat from Russia.
So people right to the top in November, and NATO and real core foundational institutions.
That would be a big deal. You'd probably have to have the various NATO members would start to figure out. Maybe you'd get some other kind of smaller alliances between countries. I don't know. I'm guessing, speculating.
We'll both be watching this space. Thank you so much again for your time, Professor at Texas Lutheran University, H. David Beer.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.